On today's pod, Indiana legislators propose a bill to reprioritize birth control. Condoms are out, pulling out is in, and we're going in deep.
And might I add, these politicians missed an opportunity to add themselves to the top of the list as the most effective form of birth control because, ew. Plus, we're talking about the threats to medication abortion, how doctors and patients can protect themselves, and how we can continue to help folks access abortion care.
Amy Merrill, founder of the incredible information hub Plan C, will help us navigate this reproductive journey into the great unknown. And we get funny, silly, and a little bit ragey with musician, writer, and performance artist Bitch.
She's here to talk about her new show, Bitchcraft, and tell us why we need to add more music and humor into our lives right now. And we're taking your questions on a new segment called Should I Be Scared?
Probably.
Yeah, definitely.
All that and the latest news on this Valentine's Day episode of the Feminist Buzzkills podcast. FBK, the show that's about to rename itself the Gulf of Abortion. What do you think, Moj?
Oh, that's a perfect name. I wonder if Google will accept it.
I know. I'm Liz Winstead, and I'm joined by my co-host, Moji Alamodale.
Hi there. You know we're taping on this Valentine's Day. And at first I wasn't feeling very amorous because RFK is now in charge of our healthcare. But then I remembered we have some love to toss out. First off, we have a February birthday shout out.
Indeed. Patreon subscriber Scott Good of Virginia had his day, February 10th. But Scott, we're going to celebrate you all of February. So happy birthday, Scotty. We hope your Aquarian ass is having a great month.
Oh, we sure do. It's my birthday month too, Scott. So,
That's right. Happy birthday, Moji.
Yes. Also, it's time for a new segment called Should I Be Scared? We've started asking folks to call or text us with their questions and concerns about all of the attacks on reproductive health care. And we wanted to help you put your concerns in perspective. So let's get to our first question.
Hi, this is Kara from Tennessee. I have noticed there are some states that are going after birth control in multiple forms. Is this something that we should expect to see in other states? And is this something that I should really be paying attention to? Thank you.
Yeah, I think in hostile Tennessee, you should be very, very afraid. And there's some really good reasons. One of the things to pay attention to is, are they attempting to reclassify forms of birth control as abortion, like IUDs or emergency contraception? And even when that happens, like really listen to what they're saying because it's smoke and mirrors. In some cases, they'll say, oh, we're not touching birth control, but then they'll say, but IUDs are abortion, not birth control. And then it's like, oh, they are touching birth controls. And just arming yourself with this sort of information and everything you need to know about these kinds of birth control are really important. And you can be an educational resource for your community.
Watch also if your legislature is trying to de-emphasize condoms or de-emphasize actual birth control, because if they're de-emphasizing condoms, that means that they're not thinking about HIV and other diseases. And also watch for laws that prioritize natural family planning, because in states where abortion bans are really bad, but really anywhere, what they're trying to do is limit your legal options so that you're just relegated to only being able to have abstinence or pregnancy. Right. And I don't think either of those things are great.
And also the other deeper dive is look at your school boards and your state sex ed curricula. They'll give you indications of what they find is important and what they're prioritizing.
That's right. And look to see what your state is doing about which healthcare is covered by Medicaid, how much Medicaid dollars are federal and how much are state. Illinois, super blue state, their Medicaid dollars are 100% federal, which means that a super blue state can't offer any kind of healthcare that the federal government deems wrong, even though they want to. It's really a mess. So, yeah.
That's really helpful. Okay, so Liz.
Yes.
How would you rank Kara's concern on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being, get your freak on, don't give it any other thought. And 5 being, Elon Musk has just moved the Doge crew into your uterus.
I'm going to give it I don't know. I'm going to say I'm going to give it a 4, only because in Tennessee, it's such a bad state for reproductive care and they're banning everything, and their anti-science mobsters that are in their state houses are going to create laws like this. So I'm giving it a 4 because anything could happen, and Tennessee pushes really hard to make sure that you have no access to reproductive care. So 4.
You know what? I'm going to agree with you on that. I think it is a 4 as well. And I think that we see bad things coming out of Tennessee, and this is just a step to making it worse.
Yep.
Let's take on our second caller.
Hi, it's Jen from New York. Been reading a lot about states that are proposing the death penalty for abortions. Is this something that I should be scared of? Seems very alarming. Any help would be great. Thanks.
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to just first come out and say and clarify that actually there are no laws calling for the death penalty. There are laws calling for murder charges, and not every state has the death penalty in their state. So since you are in New York and New York does not have capital punishment, you don't have to worry about death penalty for an abortion in New York City. But this does establish personhood. And if it's held up in Supreme Court, then we are all in the crosshairs of a national ban.
That's right. And to your question, there's been 6 states and 4 of them have the death penalty. So that's also kind of alarming. But yeah, I'm with you on that. Also, I would say it's an escalation from all these laws where all these fake pro-life people would say, we never want to punish a patient, but the doctors are terrible, which is all bullshit anyway. But they used to just criminalize doctors, and now they're moving to criminalize patients. And so I just want to say that any criminalization of abortion patients is scary and terrible. But it's 6 states, it's a test balloon, and it is something to watch for. And even though you live in New York, you want to be a citizen of the United States. And so we're also watching to see how it plays out. So, Moj, how would you rank Jen's concern on a scale of 1 to 5?
So I would rank for Jen. It's a 1, but for citizens of the United States and potentially other states, we might be at 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm going to say a 4 with an asterisk because these are all potential laws being proposed. We'll see how they pass. We're going to be following this closely to see if other states take over and if it becomes a trend. In a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to give it a 10.
Yes, because that's exactly how these things work.
Yes.
I hope we helped Jen and Kara and their questions. And if you want your concerns about the state of abortion access and reproductive health addressed, please call or text 201-574-7402. That's 201-574-7402. And you can leave your first name, your city, and fire away. Liz and I will get to as many as we can. The number will also be in the show notes.
That's right. Thanks, Moji. Okay, let's get to it and sift through the steaming pile of this week's abortion news. Kick it off, Moj.
Well, at least we can still vote. Just kidding, just kidding. Congress is trying to push a voter suppression bill that would disenfranchise people whose names don't match the driver's license and their birth certificate. And who does this affect the most? Married women, trans people, a bunch of folks who would never vote for the authors of this bill. They should just take this all the way and introduce the floater voter bill, where they would tie a brick to your leg, toss you in the river, and if you rise to the top, you can vote.
Ugh. And vasectomy for me and none for thee. Darren Beattie, the newly appointed Undersecretary of State and former keynote speaker at a white supremacy rally, has a long history of posting about sterilizing, quote, low IQ trash. One post claims higher quality humans are subsidizing the fertility of lower quality humans. Another reads, when a population gets feral, a little snip, snip keeps things in control, could offer incentives, Air Jordans, etc. So racist. No word on whether his low IQ trash snip snip will be scheduled before or after Elon, Big Balls, and the cabinet secretaries.
I hope they stream them. And finally, could Christmas trees be the answer to saving abortion? A new study reveals that ponderosa pine needles contain compounds that can lead to fetal demise and spontaneous abortion in cows. No word if the ponderosa pine has the same effect on humans, but between lack of access to abortion and the amount of needles collected when we take our trees down, seems like we should be saving those needles until further notice. A dose of ponderosa may be in our future.
And this has been your steaming news dump.
Before we get to the stories we will dig deeper into, we have some business to take care of.
Some big business. So the actor Michael Shannon and the incredible musician Jason Narducci are doing this wild REM cover band doing Fables of the Reconstruction. They're doing almost a month-long tour. And the coolest part is they have customized posters and the profits are going to Abortion Access Front. They are doing it right. Follow these guys to learn how to help. They're kicking off the tour tonight, But their show in LA, February 15th, they are collecting hygiene supplies for victims of the LA fires. So if you're going to the show, you can bring pads, you can bring wipes. We'll put a link in our show notes of all of the supplies that people are asking for. But the tour is a month long. We'll put a link to where it is. If you're in any of those cities, oftentimes Abortion Access Front's going to have a table there. So come say hi, get a poster to support our work, and throw a couple bucks in the coffers. Can't wait to see you there.
Yeah. Also, if you listen to the pod, Jason was here a few weeks ago and he is incredible. This is so exciting. Also, we have an email. So if you have any questions for us about the pod, why don't you drop us a note at podcast@aafront.org and we'll get right back to you.
We will. It is a lot going on. So,
okay, Liz, let's get to the stories we want to break down further.
Indiana is test ballooning some real scary shit that your buzzkills feel could turn into trends that other states, and gasp, even the federal level goons could try to impose upon us all.
Yeah, so a few weeks back, Indiana passed a bill to make abortion medical records public. And this was done through court. And the Indiana Department of Health just agreed, because of a court order, to release termination of pregnancy reports, called TPRs, and to remove their designation as confidential medical records.
Yikes.
I know, it's really scary. And TPRs include the name of the abortion provider, though not the name of the person who undergoes the abortion, but the reports can have other demographic information like medical history, zip code, and county and residence of the individual patients. So one could, in fact, get into their privacy. And also, this isn't really necessary because the department has already released regular summary data 4 times a year. So this is really just to chill people who try to get the few abortions that slip under their ban.
And it's really scary because the public doesn't need this information, right? Now, the good news is 2 doctors in Indiana, abortion providers, Caroline Rouse and Dr. Caitlin Bernard, are fighting back and claiming, among other things, that, like you said, the information in these reports can be reverse engineered to identify somebody who has received an abortion in the state. Now, and that's the part that I think that I really want to drill down on, because if you think about it, Indiana has a near total abortion ban. And so abortions went from hundreds to just small, like 12, 15 a month, right? And so the less abortions you have, the easier it is with that information to figure out who had the abortion, especially in Indiana, where there's 100 fake clinics to every, there's no clinics really.
There's no
in
clinics.
Indiana,
I'm like,
right?
what real clinics are in Indiana in 2025?
Yeah, so there's 100 fake clinics. And since 2022, they have gotten $9 million from the state of Indiana to really fund them to like boost up where they are. And so if you go to a fake clinic and you give your information about being pregnant and they know you're pregnant, they could easily call you and say, hey, I'd love to check in on how your pregnancy's going. And then if you're like, I had an abortion because you didn't know not to say, that's ammunition for them to go to the state and possibly criminalize you. And I just feel like that's the thing that we need to think about when you have so little abortions. It could blow up in your face. And one of the doctors, Caitlin Bernard, you all probably recall, what is the OBGYN in Indiana who was fined for performing abortion on a 10-year-old who was forced to travel from Ohio to receive care in Indiana.
Yeah, that story made national news. It was really heartbreaking.
Yeah, really heartbreaking. And, you know, I just, as a sidebar, I drive back and forth to New York about 4 times a year. And Moji, you've actually done it with me.
Yes, I have.
And the billboards in Indiana are so fucking intense that those fake clinics are advertised like, and that's just on I-80. They're advertised everywhere. So the chances of somebody's given their information to a nefarious person is very, very high.
And when you think about all these fake clinics, right, you're like, well, where does someone go to find actual health information? And it turns out not much, because Indiana's got more great news. And that is another law flew out of committee this week that basically narrows the options for birth control for Medicaid recipients. This is really nefarious because the bill's stated goal was to increase access to family planning for Medicaid recipients, but it decided to remove IUDs and condoms as covered methods of birth control. The upside is that it keeps birth control pills as approved methods, but what are they thinking about when you can't use an IUD, right? And it also adds in natural family planning. And natural family planning gets under my skin. It's also called the rhythm method, and it's labor intensive, and it's truly just not that effective, right? The steps go into it is like taking your temperature, tracking your period. If you are irregular or breastfeeding or stressed, everything can fly out the window. It's not contraception. And none of the approved methods protect people from STIs, not a single one.
And this goes back to the caller Kara's question earlier about like what to look for. Should I be worried? It's when the state starts removing information and de-emphasizing important pieces of family planning and reproductive health. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that I don't know a single person who's trying to not get pregnant using natural family planning. I feel like everybody's like, I'm checking my period to find out exactly when I'm fertile enough to get knocked up, right? And to remove condoms, it's just a recipe for STD disaster, right? And
Yes.
we've seen this happen in Indiana because, number one, sex ed in Indiana schools are not required to teach sex ed. However,
Nope.
schools are required to teach instruction on HIV/AIDS. But the curriculum, this is crazy. It actually says curriculum is not required to be comprehensive.
And not comprehensive means not teaching about consent. It means not teaching about a lot of things.
And also totally teaching about abstinence.
Right. Which that doesn't work either. That's like natural family planning. That's
Exactly. And parents can withdraw their kids from classes and have their kids abstain from classes. So, when you have uninformed kids, they're going to fuck with really bad information in their brains. And when you're 16, you have an erection like 25 hours a day if you're a boy.
That's
And
accurate.
young girls are excited about boys. And, it's really a mess. And I think that it's important to remind people, not only is this ass backwards, Indiana has this profound history of totally fucking up when it comes to lack of access to STD prevention and pregnancy prevention. Back in 2011, when Mike Pence was governor, they shut down a bunch of Planned Parenthoods who were providing STD testing and treatment. And the result was an outbreak of 235 patients getting HIV. And it was so bad that Mike Pence literally had to, reinstate a clean needle policy because hello. And guess what? The HIV cases stopped growing.
And what's wild about it is just to give it to us like 200, 235 doesn't sound like a lot when you hear about millions of people having HIV, but Indiana jumped from having about 5 cases a year to that 235. And you're right. After a few years of needle exchange, it was back down to under 10.
And the biggest irony of all of this is that they closed down these Planned Parenthoods, and it was so bad. They had to open pop-up clinics to treat people. Again, all you needed to do was not do that.
Right. Because, and if you looked at the trends at Planned Parenthood at the time, the increase of the amount of HIV testing they were doing was increasing.
Yes.
At the time they closed it. And so they would have increased it. And as this epidemic grew, they could have addressed it effectively, but they said, nah, we're good.
I know. I mean, these Indiana cases are super important to watch because as they're releasing records and redefining birth control, these things seem ripe for making their way to SCOTUS challenges. And remember, during the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court, namely Clarence Thomas, said birth control is not in the Constitution and it should be revisited. And if the abortion is not healthcare crowd picks up steam, privacy around our abortion records could also be eradicated. So we'll be following this, and you should too.
This is deeply depressing, Liz. Can we move on to more?
To more depressing?
Yeah, to more depressing. Can we? Let's move on to some more depressing hijinks for this week and a story that is developing at the time of this recording. So we have been following the case of a New York City doctor who's being sued by 2 different states for sending pills from New York, where abortion provision is legal, to patients in states where the pills are banned, basically Louisiana and Texas.
They're going to a lot of states, right?
Yeah.
So lawsuits have popped up, and the state of Louisiana has just filed extradition papers for the doctor. Now, we wanted to talk to an expert about this story and the risks to medication abortion in this new world order. So we are stoked to be joined by our next guest, who is an expert on all things pills by mail?
Pills account for 63% of abortions performed in this country. They offer a level of privacy and several levels of accessibility, which means naturally the enemies of freedom are working 24/7 to strip access and up prosecutions.
Joining us today to talk about what we're up against and how we can protect ourselves when advocating or accessing the medication itself is the founder and co-director of Plan C, Amy Merrill.
Hi, Amy.
Hey, Amy.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, we're so glad you're here and we love your work. But before we deep dive into holy shit, what should we be scared about? Talk a little bit about Plan C and your work.
So, Plan C is a decade-old initiative to do research and then share out information on abortion pills by mail and safe self-managed options in the US. And so today this takes the form of our website where we list all of the results of our research, where we list the services we know to be available, the free confidential resources that people can access. And today that includes everything from telehealth to alternate sources of pills to robust medical and legal helplines. And then aside from that, we run a communications campaign and forge partnerships so that, again, this information can be shared widely and used widely to educate the public on methods that, frankly, people have already been using for decades, both here in the States and around the world, but it still needs some work to elevate these options to educate folks in the US and to help folks reclaim some agency over their abortions.
I love the name Plan C. I feel like it really captures and makes clear what you do. Medication abortion and self-managed abortion are completely in the crosshairs of the anti-abortion movement, and they're trying all kinds of legal shenanigans to prosecute organizations who aid and abet. So by even providing info, are you worried about them coming after you?
We talk to lawyers all the time, and we acknowledge the landscape is going to continue to evolve. What we do falls squarely into the lane of free speech, and we're sharing information, we're sharing opportunities for education. There have been threats. You might have seen in the press, politicians in restricted states have tried to introduce new bills that would force the internet service provider not to serve up the Plan C website as well as other sites. They have, tried to pass these things through, which are an absolute infringement on our free speech rights. So far, the tactics haven't worked. And what's interesting is that the extremist right relies on free speech also. They want to be able to say whatever they want. So while, of course, abortion ends up getting treated differently in this country, we can't predict what's to come, but we plan on continuing to share information. And we expect any challenges to free speech to come with major nationwide pushback.
Yeah, I think that's right, too. The thing that we keep going back to is even if we win, who prosecutes them? It's like this, what is this ladder? And that's the part that we're just constantly at, like, yes, we have the right to do that. But in this new world order, who gets to have free speech? Who doesn't? Who are terrorists? Who isn't? It's all this kind of wild slope that we're walking on. And so having said that, what are some moves that you're seeing from the anti-abortion movement that keep you up at night?
I think most concerning is exactly what you just described, is the sort of unbridled approach of the other side, and that we're seeing this administration and the state by state lawmakers are not really interested in playing by the rules. They are going to introduce threats to bodily autonomy, religiously written legislation, all sorts of things that are unconstitutional, that are also untested. There's a lot of brand new ideas coming through just to see what sticks. So my concern is what you're saying is that it's about wanting the access movement to remain vigilant and to stay strong and creative and know how they can push back, know how they can protect and help people to access what they need no matter what, whether it's abortion or birth control or gender affirming care. I think we can learn from other countries who have dealt with this for a long time. And there are a lot of international coalition spaces where folks are sharing learnings and sharing support. But I think it's, I've thought a lot the past couple of years about the idea of American exceptionalism.
What is that? What is this?
I don't know about that. Tell me more about that.
I'm not an expert, but what I've read is that American exceptionalism is the idea that folks in the US think that they're special and that they, things that happen in other countries could never happen here, or we're always going to have certain protections or certain following of the rules. And I think that gets us into trouble because it's just not true. We think it can't happen here until it does.
It sounds like white supremacy or white privilege,
Right. You
right?
can also call it
American exceptionalism just means white people being like, oh, not me, I'm good.
I love that you brought that up because we have 12 states that actually have enacted shield laws of varying levels of strength, and they've done them to protect abortion providers in states where the procedure is legal and allow them to help someone in a banned state. Can you explain what a shield law is, what the legal rationale is for being able to mail pills to someone in a banned state, just so that people who are not paying attention will know?
Yes. So I should have stated earlier, I'm not a lawyer, but because I do this work, I learn a lot about these things. And shield laws have now been around for about 2 years. And it came up as a legal strategy to protect telehealth abortion providers who wanted to mail pills to states with bans. And so the states that were protective of abortion, the states you referenced, have devised laws, protections that take the form of ensuring the provider would not be extradited. They look like, guaranteeing the medical board would not do anything to the provider's license. They basically set up a series of protections so that telehealth provider could then offer care and mail pills into restricted states. Now, each state is different, so you'd have to look at the state by state shield laws and learn about the differences. Some of them protect patient records. And there's a question about do they protect the person seeking care? And that is one of the confusing part of the language around shield laws. It sounds like, well, it's just a blanket protection. Now we're all shielded. Well, that's not really how states work, right? The state of New York cannot shield a person in Texas from Texas's laws. So the state of New York has done everything they can to set up this system that, by the way, as we in this room all know, is medically sound, is modern care, is very straightforward.
Is safe.
Is safe, is effective, is the way that telehealth abortion is happening in all of the permissive states, very successfully, lots of research, proving patient satisfaction, proving medical safety, effectiveness, et cetera. So all that aside, we know that's not the reality we're living in. So the person in the state with restrictions still has to understand their own legal risk. You've probably talked about this many times on this pod, but in the vast majority of the states, the abortion bans do not target the pregnant person, right? There's often carve-outs even for the pregnant person. That said, that doesn't eliminate risk. In this day and age, prosecutors can try to use all sorts of language of the law to try and get someone if they're trying to target an abortion seeker. But that is definitely, again, one of the points of confusion about shield laws. And at Plan C, as we share our information that we've gathered on shield law providers, we always try to add that context that every individual needs to understand their own level of risk and make this decision fully informed. And there are resources to do that. The If When How's Repro Legal Helpline is still the number one resource that we share on the legal front, where someone can call and get all their questions answered and just be fully equipped to make this decision from where they sit.
Yeah. And I think, it's a new navigation. And because it's new and we're seeing Louisiana and Texas suing a New York physician for providing this care, it feels maybe to the common ears, well, how is that possible? Why is that? And that's, one of the things where the If, When, and How website's a really good resource to go find out how it is. And also, I just think too, a lot of people don't know that if you are a physician that provides care in Texas, if you go to Texas, they could arrest you. If you leave your state and go to that state, they can take you on. So, if you're providing if you're a New York doctor providing in Tennessee, no Dollywood for you. You have to make that decision. And so I say that only to remind people that when a physician decides to provide care to people in banned states, they have assessed their life and put your life ahead of theirs. And that's pretty cool.
It's true. These shield laws are untested. They are a brand new strategy. They, again, lean on the fact that telehealth is so common and it's so supported in other ways. But we don't know how it's going to play out. You're absolutely right. These are activists. These providers that have decided to take advantage of shield laws are activists. They believe in the oath that they took to serve their patients, and they believe in the crisis of the moment and what's required. So they're committed to using the technology and all that's available to them to serve people. And it's in the tens of thousands, people getting pills by mail, getting telehealth in this country is in the tens of thousands, including all states, including permissive states. But those Shield Law providers alone, I believe, are serving between 10 and 20,000 people a month. So that's pretty remarkable. And while we don't know how it will play out, what I read about the state of New York in particular is that they are so committed to standing up to these threats, and they're even doubling down. They just passed another Shield Law that no longer requires the provider to put their name on a prescription bottle. And other states with Shield Laws are looking at if they could do that as well. So it's a Wild West, right?
It is a Wild West. And I want to step back a little bit to patients, because I do feel like where permissive states are really trying to build the infrastructure to protect doctors. But patients, I think we wonder about like ways that patients could be better protected. In previous conversations Liz and I have had, it's like maybe if people better understood what went into a medication abortion, then they would be less likely to put themselves in situations where a healthcare worker who has some sort of political agenda could, whatever. Are there other things you can think of that maybe patients could do? I mean, I think speaking broadly about assessing risk, and of course, understanding that none of us here are lawyers, but what are things patients can do in a Louisiana, in a Texas, to maybe better protect themselves looking at what we're seeing?
Absolutely. Again, I think information is key right now. So becoming informed, being able to call a hotline, call the M&A hotline, get your medical questions answered, have a plan, know what you're getting into, know what to expect. Some of the situations that we see come out of people not knowing what to expect. And so then if they are farther along than they thought, or if they bleed more than they expected, then they might panic and they might, take themselves to the nearest ER, even if it's not a friendly ER. There's all sorts of things that might go wrong, I would say, if someone doesn't have a plan. So I think it is about equipping themselves with full context of the decision they're making. Another side note from the research that we've read over the years is that people are making these decisions weighing all sorts of factors, right? Legal is one factor. Their family life is another factor, their job, their kids, their relationship, their whatever, their money, their financial situation. Like these are complex decisions often. And so the legal is one aspect. It's incredibly harmful because it creates so much fear and chaos and real legal risk. But I think, one of the things we've said over all these years is that trust people to know how to make their decisions, right? Equip them with the information, give it a lot of context, give it the proper weight, but do not give people a limited view of what's available to them because you think it's going to protect them. These are unprecedented times, and we do need to know what the F is going on. And so I think that there is a way that folks can be informed more than they are. The other thing that comes to mind is that you don't need an abortion until you need one, right? So you might not research and become an expert until you need to be. So the moment you need it, you start to do your research. We work really hard on search results, on SEO, on looking at search and what is coming up on search. We work really hard to get the Plan C website at the top of search, even though we're blocked from places like Google Ads. We can't do Google Ads, but we work really hard to show up on search and to understand what people are finding. Staying digitally safe, as you all know, is super important. There are some pretty concrete steps to mind what apps you're using to communicate, to be mindful who you speak to consider if you want to use a VPN. These are recommendations that I would say apply across the board right now as we see the kind of fickle nature of tech companies and what they are and are not willing to stand up for and how they're using people's data. So those become just kind of general best practices, I think. But yeah, between information, staying digitally safe, calling the hotlines, understanding the resources that are available to you, I think that is what the baseline of what we can do to help people be okay in these times.
Jokingly, sometimes I'm just like, burn the wrappers. Everyone, just burn the wrappers.
Yeah, right. I also think, too, we get these laws because the information's not out there, because the information is blocked. And, I think it can't be stressed enough, Amy, your point that not only should you educate yourself about how and where you can access the care, but also what abortion is so that you don't have to spend emotional labor where you're already in a place where you're trying to make a decision about what is an abortion. Those fears around what that is, it's super important to make sure that you educate yourself and learn that. And my other point too is just, while it's true that many states don't criminalize the patient, that's ever changing as we're seeing, 6 states now talking about murder charges for patients. People are taking over state legislatures who believe that anybody who has an abortion, anybody who helps somebody who has an abortion should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Justice is different for everybody. If they mistrust who you are based on your economic status or, the color of your skin, whether or not your miscarriage was a miscarriage or valid, like all that stuff comes into play. And so I appreciate everything you said. And I think that it's so important. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is you are so robust in giving research and always up to date. Your website's really great about just helping people learn all those things. How does your work change, or what does it look like if, let's say, they start aggressively enforcing the Comstock Act, or if they roll back FDA approval? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of scenario planning that we're doing right now, unfortunately. And I want to just say one more thing about what you just described. I think you're absolutely right that this is the moment to just learn and get informed and know what an abortion is. And I have this idea for a campaign at some point, communications campaign, of just know the protocol, just know how this works. And again, know what to expect, know what might happen in the body before you even need it. And from the beginning, I've felt like Plan C does not belong to us, to me, to my co-founders, to, the nonprofit. This is information that exists. This is information that everyone needs to know in this country. And if we disseminate the research and information, then it just lives with the people.
Yeah.
It's not like we hoard it and we control it. Like, we keep the directory up to date based on our research. But ultimately, if the, large swaths of people know how abortion pills work and where people are finding them online, then it doesn't live with Plan C. It just lives in the ether, in the internet. So that's part of our thinking. And it's a very refreshing way to approach it, because we're not institutionalizing. We're not desperately trying to, grow our organization and be here forever. We're just we're here in this moment to blast out the reality, to blast out information. And we know that people need it. It's been proven over and over that people need it, that they want it, and then we'll, evolve as the landscape evolves. And so, as you mentioned, we're looking at, we're hearing about rumors, murmurs of how the incoming administration could weaponize ancient laws. The Comstock Act is 150 years old. It's been overturned. It's been overruled in court many times over. So it's actually considered dead. Any use would be a misapplication of this law that has been proven time and time again to be unconstitutional and unenforceable. But here we are. And so if a new sort of strategy came down from on high, from a federal level, then first of all, it would sow chaos. Let's make no mistake. It would create absolute chaos in systems of care, in systems of pill delivery. I would say every group, every provider would be making their own decisions about what they're still able to do, how the pills are distributed from the manufacturers. All that is sort of, again, being scenario planned by different abortion organizations, but is somewhat unknown. And what we believe at Plan C is that sources of pills by mail and support will continue to exist no matter what. And part of why we believe that is that services are operating from overseas right now. And those are coming in through, they're still coming through the mail. They're still coming into states with restrictions, but the providers are not perhaps under the same legislation, under the same kinds of systems. So we believe those services will continue to mail to people. We believe the hotlines will continue to offer support. We do believe the risk will be heightened because suddenly you're operating under some, the ante has been upped. But we're going to keep sharing information on what we know to be available and what we know to be supportive in terms of the resources that exist.
As we're talking about pills from overseas, I'm are they going to have tariffs on them? Are they going to be literally are we going to have a 30% jump in cost? Can they even come in? How are they coming in? It's a whole world of wild, but you have been incredibly helpful with telling folks what to do and helping people understand that there are many, many ways that they can get information and access care safely and advocate safely.
Thank you. I do want to mention one more thing. I realized we didn't talk about getting pills in advance, but right now we know that people are also ordering pills in advance all across the country. And that is definitely a way folks can choose to, again, take their agency back and have this medication on hand before things continually change, which they will.
Get your pills now.
Keep them in the fridge. Can you tell people how long pills last if they get them right now?
Yes, the pills last on average around 2 years. And the best recommendation that providers typically offer is to look at the expiration date on the package and use that as your guiding force. But if someone gets pills in advance and they put them in their cabinet, they can keep that 2-year window in mind and then always just check the expiration date.
Is there a storage things we should talk about?
Yeah, it is wise to keep them cool and dry. And the story that folks used to say was put them in your medicine cabinet because that's the place where you have your Tylenol, your whatever. But in fact, the moisture of the bathroom can sometimes cause issues. Providers also recommend not opening the packages until you need them if possible, because that can cause them to break down. So
I'm going to say if it's cool and dry, I'm going to store a box right in my uterus. I got nothing going on. I got nothing going on there now. I feel like I have a purpose. All of a sudden I feel like I have a new purpose, which
well,
makes
you
me
also
endlessly
won't,
happy.
most deaf won't get pregnant, right?
That's right.
Up there.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us. Your work is awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Amy. This is such a great conversation and so important and so timely. I feel like I can't personally stop singing about the benefits of pills from the rooftop just because of the way that they make your abortion care just a little more discreet. You can do it your way, your time, on your effort. Can you tell people about where they can find Plan C pills and how they can support your work?
Absolutely. Thank you. So our website is at plancpills.org. And we have a community there where folks are hopping on board to learn more and to stay on top of activism opportunities. That's also where information on pills in advance lives. And there's a new site I wanted to mention. YouAlwaysHaveOptions.com is a resource site that is an easy to remember URL that houses about 8 or 9 of these resources all in one place. You can basically share that out. If you're posting about the latest abortion news, you can share the URL YouAlwaysHaveOptions.com. And that's sort of a one-stop shop for people to start to learn and potentially access the resources they need.
Amy, thank you so much. We'll make sure that these links are in our show notes.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy. You can get more information about Amy's work at plancpills.org and follow at plancpills on Insta, Facebook, and TikTok. All of these links will be in the show notes, as well as links to all the Indiana fuckery and the steaming dump stories. And rolling off a segment about planning for your abortion, remember you can always find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org.
Our Charlie chatbot at the bottom right will walk anyone anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion. We do this show because the information is not given enough attention in the media. So help us spread the word and show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Every little bit helps us to reach more listeners to get people active. Okay, we're going to transition to some positive energy, finally, with our next guest.
We love her witchy ways and how she uses music and performance to captivate audiences. Here to talk about her new solo show, Bitchcraft, a musical play, which debuted off-Broadway in New York this month. Please welcome musician, writer, and performance artist, Bitch.
Bitch!
Hey! Good to talk to you.
Oh
So
my
good to
God.
talk to you.
So good to talk to you. We felt like you're what we need right now.
Yes.
That's so nice to hear.
Bitch, how are you holding up in this attempt at a post-feminist hellscape that Trump is working to create?
My goddess. Oh, how am I holding up? I guess barely.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right.
And, I was lucky enough to tune in. Toshi Regan had a live stream from Joe's Pub the day after the election.
Oh, incredible.
And, obviously all of us were so shaken. And something Toshi said was, I woke up this morning thinking, I'm so glad to have a practice. And, that is something that I've been centering for myself just because, what a crazy reality we're entering into. And weirdly, I never thought I would be doing this play in a Trump America. You know, I really could not even fathom that it could get like this. And, you know, I owe it to myself. I feel the women of the world to make this good and to encourage people to keep pricking doing their practices, whatever it is, community organizing, writing, painting, whatever it is, to keep moving us forward, even in the new hellscape reality.
It's true. I have made a commitment to myself to be in community at least 3 times a week, and that's just like hanging out with friends, playing Scrabble, going to hear music, going to look at art, and then the activism on top of it, because I do believe that connection is key. And I love that you talked about your art being this healing for you, but this particular show, and we'll talk about the show in our next question, but you have audience participation in the show that is literally like a catharsis. Did that evolve or was that intentional?
Ooh. You know, I've always intended to have the audience as part of this in some way. And, you know, thankfully, I've written songs like that. You know, I mean, ever since the late 90s when Animal and I wrote the Pussy Manifesto, it's always been a call and response. And I love that you point that out, because one of my things as a performance artist is really acknowledging and understanding that I'm never actually alone up there. And without the audience, you know, this doesn't happen. So I love making the audience participate. And obviously, like on a bigger level, I think participation, as you pointed out, and being in community and togetherness is crucial. So if my, you know, little piece of art is encouraging that and encouraging people to open their mouths and not kind of passively stand by, then that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get to it. Actually, let's talk about this, right? This play, it's got music, it's got comedy, it's burning down the patriarchy. It has it all. So will you let folks know about the show and just, you know, just tell them what they should expect?
Okay, so yes, we have had many iterations, and this is a new iteration of this play. It's an autobiographical story about a young, either is she shy and quiet or is she shut down child who goes on to name herself bitch and give herself the permission to be loud. And so it takes you on a journey of my story, and it is a wild broomstick ride, as a lot of girls may relate to, you know, being raised to do, you know, the domestic work in the house and things like that. So I use the broom as a recurring character. And yes, it follows me through my early days of my career with Bitch and Animal. And then we go into my solo days and a hiccup along the way that then leads me into isolation, to then come back out and decide to share my art again in Bitchcraft. So hopefully it's a triumphant story, and I've been told it's very relatable in a world that wants women to be small and quiet. It's a story about teaching ourselves how to take up space.
Both Moji and I and our producer Jen all saw the show in like 2022, and we all walked away from it feeling so incredibly empowered, and we all related to it. And I think what I love is we all come from wildly different backgrounds and upbringings and even personality joints, right? And so to be able to have that speak to us, all of us, is really cool.
Yes.
I want to ask you, I always wonder when somebody decides to throw it out to the public, right? You're like going in, you're fucking being like, okay, warts and all, people.
Exactly.
Is there something that is off limits that you're like, you know what? The public doesn't get to have this. This gets to be mine. Or do you feel like, I don't give a fuck, learn everything?
That is such a good question. I will say that this new version is even more vulnerable than the last version you saw. And there were things in the last versions where, my collaborators or advisors were saying like, ooh, you kind of skip over that and you kind of skip over that. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm terrified. And it's been a process of what I've learned through this process writing this play is that vulnerability, it speaks. And even like taking on the name bitch in my 20s was definitely like a shield and kind of like a giant FU.
Fuck yeah.
Bitch used to be an armor. And what I'm learning now in kind of my, next phase of life is that the less I'm fighting, the better. The less I'm fighting my own self and my own story, the better, because the vulnerability is, for me, it's been very terrifying to share certain parts of my story. But in the end, I'm realizing like, wow, I really can kind of trust this. And it's been really liberating. So yes, there's a few things in this new version that I was terrified of sharing. And I think my hope and my understanding so far is that it's even more, then it makes it even deeper for people. I sacrificed myself for my art a long time ago, so why stop now?
It's funny because I was wearing your shirt recently, and my mom came over and she was like, "What does that shirt say?" And I was like, "Oh, it says bitch." I was like, "You should listen to her song, Pussy Manifesto." And like my mom was moved. And so I also just want to say like the timelessness of like your early work for a woman in her 70s, like still struck her.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that means so much to me. Thank you.
I feel like feminists, you kind of clocked this, right? But feminists need to take a page from cheating white men because they just own their shit and they stand there and they're like, I'm bringing this to the foreground and I'm saying I did this. And everyone's like, okay, let's move along now. We bring our shit to the world and we own it and it's our story to tell. Nobody else can define us by whatever we want to tell. We define it.
So true.
I know, it is true. Okay, so we talked a little bit about creativity as a way to cope. What I wanted to ask you is, as you're somebody who pays attention to the world and is in this hellscape all with us, do you think that the washing of fascism that's happened, do you think you could have sat down and focused and written the show in this time, started it?
In this state.
Wow. What a great question. It's really hard to say. It's like, I mean, my first instinct is no. I feel like I would have been running for the hills.
I know, I can barely wear pants that have a zipper. I'm like, this is too much.
Yeah, and even like the day after the election, I was so shaken, and I had a writing session with my co-writer and director, Margie, and I was just kind of listless and like, what does this even matter anymore? I feel so almost selfish sitting here caring about, my story when there's such obviously huge issues going on. And, all that I kept focusing on is like, okay, but the world needs this. The world needs, to witness our own expression, our own power, our own taking up spaceness. Like we have to keep going. We can't let them tell the story. I mean, even like in the middle of the night, there I am like Googling, like with all my privilege and my, English. I do have an English passport. I'm like, should I just go to England, freaking out. And again, Toshi brought me back to center. She's talking about like, this is the time, like we dig in harder. We dig in harder. It's not the time to flee because then they win,
Also, you're telling an entire story that's full of magic and wonder, but it's also about overcoming the shit that's in your world. And that's what people need to hear right now. They need to know that getting out of bed is worth it. And anybody whose art can reflect that for them, I think is like crucial. So I'm glad that you found that, and I'm glad that you understand that, how crucial it is.
Thank you.
So, bitch, this is, like Liz says, again, it's so hard to move forward. And I'm so glad that you have this work and that it exists. What are your plans to take it out to outside of New York? Are there plans to like stream it or take it out or just get it to the other people in the world who need this as much as we need it?
Yes, I hope so. I have like a few fantasies that I'm casting spells for. I mean, of course, like I've always thought about like, ooh, a Netflix special, a way to tweak it so it can be filmed. I've thought, okay, is the next step, a bigger theater in New York and then it goes on tour. As an Aries, I am trying my hardest not to think I have all the answers. Because the fact is that I'm like, okay, I can go down these paths of like, okay, what's the future? I've got to organize this. And honestly, I am in a whole new world, like the theater making world of things, having a one-person show. It's actually a one-person, one beaver show. What are those realities? How does it work on a business level? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, bitch, just make the best show you know how, and hopefully those opportunities will come to you. So yes, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. I want Bitchcraft to be, a worldwide phenomenon, and I have no idea how to make that happen besides making the art of it the best thing it can be.
I feel like you're going to do it. And I feel like the world is destined to see this, whether it's streaming, whether it's at a bigger theater, or whether it's touring it. But I'm just so glad to talk to you. You were such a breath of fresh air, just reminding us also like how important art, culture, music, and humor are to our daily lives and our resilience. So thank you, bitch, so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate you including my voice in what y'all are making, because it is also so important and so vital to so many people right now.
We're going to be calling you up again to make sure you're part of some other cool thing that we do. So don't you worry. We got you on speed dial.
Heck yes. Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks, bitch.
Thank you.
You gotta see this play, Bitchcraft. It's running at the Wild Project in New York City until March 1st. You can learn more about Bitch at her website, bitchmusic.com, or follow her on Insta and TikTok. Of course, these links will be in our show notes.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. And thanks again to Amy Merrill. And be sure to check out plantseedpills.org and youalwayshaveoptions.com for abortion pills and resources.
That's right. Did we make you smarter today? Make you laugh? Look. Again, show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, stay connected with us every single day on social media at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access, and we can get everybody involved to fix it. And if we've inspired you even that much, you might want to find some abortion activism of your own. Well, good news, we've got a 5-part training series called Operation Save Abortion at operationsaveabortion.com. And while you're there, you can visit our super cool activist calendar, which is full of local and national actions and educational opportunities.
Today, we're featuring the Women's Health Center of Maryland for Adopt a Clinic. They're looking for everything from headphones to hand warmers to condoms. Show them some love for Valentine's Day. Link is in the show notes. If you want to get more involved but not sure how, you can always sign up to volunteer at our website, aafront.org, and let's figure it out together.
That's right. And join us next week. We're speaking with the extraordinary Minnesota State Rep Leah Fink, a trans woman who is working to make Minnesota a haven for queer families. Plus, from the Rewire News Group, Executive Director Mallory Johns joins us to talk about why independent news outlets not run by billionaires and not bending the knee are more important than ever at this moment.
Also, join our Patreon. You'll support great content and get cool FBK merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. Pledge at patreon.com/Feminist Buzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy de Tournay and is produced by Abortion Access Front.
Finally, we leave you with the nation's new spiritual advisor, Paula White, who's showing her whole ass in this clip that'll leave you saying, "Holy abortion, Batman."
In the name of Jesus, we command all satanic pregnancies to miscarry right now. We declare that anything that's been conceived in satanic wombs, that it'll miscarry. It will not be able to carry forth any plan of destruction, any plan of harm.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.